A wise man once said, with great success comes great haters. Now, Palworld has continued to blow up. 6 million sales in 4 days. We don't know how many more millions of people are playing on Game Pass, but we do know that this game sold 1 million more copies in 3 days for a grand total of 4 million sales than The Last of Us 2 did at 3 million sales in 3 days. Which is why you're seeing a lot of Sony developers right now really salty and just absolutely obliterating their company's reputation while threatening the developers of Palworld or directing hate toward them. Now, before we go on, a few updates on the news. I've heard a lot of Nintendo fans are attacking the Palworld developers, specifically Nintendo Twitter. I like to specify that because people who are not on Twitter, I do imagine they have better things to do with their lives. No offense to anyone who's actually on Twitter and actually doesn't participate in this behavior. You know the people I'm talking about. And as to the death threats, there's been a clarification, or I found a clarification that said there were some tweets that appeared to be death threat like. So it might not be exactly death threats, but statements made toward them that are very similar, or actually might be outright death threats at first glance. And then, maybe upon reveal, they actually are death threats. I imagine they did not linger on the topic because it is emotionally disturbing and draining to deal with when you should be celebrating right now. After 6 million sales, congratulations to the Palworld developers. You've earned this. Now, speaking of haters, we go to the game developers. I've highlighted some parts here. Let's get into this. Now, keep in mind right here, this is a guy who's basically making the claim, showing the meshes and assets. And even right there it says, not exactly, but apparently quite close. So, and that's something you're going to see throughout all these statements, that it looks close, but it isn't an exact rip. So they're just making noise over nothing out of petty. I'm not even going to pretend to get into their minds, let's be honest. To accidentally create a complex model mesh with so near, keyword so near, exact proportions is practically impossible. It really isn't. Former Blizzard and PlayStation developer Eric Covington says, to repeat that improbability throughout your roster doesn't pass the sniff test. When he got blowback, he claimed that he wasn't working to aim pitchforks, that his goal was to warn developers, please do not cut corners. You increase the risk to your project, your company, and your credibility to your teammates and peers. Okay, that still says 6 million sales in 4 days. By the week's out, it might have 10 million sales. Compared to the Sony guy who just got blown out of the water by an indie developer with a budget of just over $20 million. I think it was like 21, somewhere in there. I was listening to a podcaster talking about how much this game was made for, and yeah, it has a vastly lower budget than anything Sony has made. So you can really see why Sony devs are pretty salty right now. And the real takeaway, and I'm just going to interject this here, is that these developers gave the consumer what they said they wanted, and the consumer actually wanted that. They wanted a Pokemon-like game that was mature on a variety of platforms. When one delivered, people bought it up. PlayStation, Xbox, they both could have answered this call. Anyone could have. But they chose to ignore the consumers and keep pushing stuff that the consumer really didn't want or was not going to blow up as big as Palworld has. So the real takeaway is not you increase the risk to your project, your company, and the credibility of your teammates and peers. The real message and takeaway from this is listen to the consumers and do evaluate whether or not the consumers are just talking out their ass or you're just hearing a vocal minority. But do listen to the consumers, because 6 million sales did not happen by accident. And I do imagine by the end of the week, we're going to be talking about 10 million sales, and who knows how many millions of sales by the end of the month. A former Ubisoft developer and concept artist joined in, said it's pretty hard to argue this is taking inspiration. Basically makes the argument that, oh, based on the videos up here, which, again, not exact, but apparently quite close, show that it might be a case for infringement. VGC, they spoke to two AAA artists, one of which said this to say, you cannot in any way accidentally get the same proportions on multiple models from another game without ripping the models. Keep in mind that. That's an absolute statement. You cannot in any way. Now watch this next sentence. Or at the very least, tracing them meticulously first. So you apparently can, and this person's just talking out their ass. Before adding, I would stand in court to testify as an expert on this. But you won't go public with your name. Note that. And so let's actually see what the article actually had to say at VGC. There's the same quote right there. The wireframe meshes look different, so they're not the same models. Okay, case closed. Let's move on and go enjoy the game. Or talk about new games coming out next month. I mean, right, people? Case closed. We're done. We're done here, right? We good? We good? Everyone good? 6 million sales. Let's party. Anyone got some champagne, some Mountain Dew, or whatever your drink of choice is? Kevin, you have to keep covering the article. Fine. But it's so close that they may have built over the top of Pokemon models and made a few changes so they weren't exactly the same. Okay, so even if they did this, you are saying they altered them enough that it wouldn't be copying. So they're basically in the transformative section of protected by legality. So again, we're done here? No, we're not done here. When does heavily inspired become blatant copy? It's much easier to take a successful style and tweak it slightly than it is to come up with something new and cohesive style, right? These are the developers who said they didn't care about originality. Well, the CEO did. He just wanted to make good games that had mass appeal. And if they weren't exactly the most original things, he didn't really care. He wanted his game to be played by a lot of people. I really don't think these people are having the slam dunks they think they're having. I wouldn't be comfortable passing this off as my work. Well, okay, I just had to make sure still 6 million sales. It's just too close in many places. Yeah, no, still 6 million sales. But, you know, this guy doesn't want a game that would sell 6 million copies, so perfectly understandable. And a lawyer chimed in. It's down to Nintendo to absolutely prove copying, not merely taking influence, he told VGC. This is David Hansel. It's got to be obvious copying. You look at it one picture and you look at another alongside it. The industry would have come to an end years ago if you weren't allowed to take influence. You can't have a monopoly on a certain style of artwork. It literally has to be copying. The Pokemon Company will be looking for a smoking gun, and these 3D model videos could be the gold dust for the lawyers because they're not just thematically similar. From what those videos show, it could be extremely compelling evidence of copying. Could be. And even again, they say they're not exactly the same. So again, these people are just making noise. Now, Hogue Law, I do recommend checking out his channel. He's a cool dude. He added this sensibility. I can't speak to the science used on this Twitter account, but certainly evidence of actual assets being stolen is the kind of thing that is likely to make a more successful case. Being simply inspired by existing designs, even if that goes so far as to use certain design rules, proportions, coloration, curve usage, eye size, etc., is generally not. So at the end of the day, this is a huge nothing burger. And then the CEO, Mizobi, my apologies if I mispronounce your name, said this. Speaking to Japanese site Automation, Pocket Pair CEO Mizobi claimed that the Palworld had cleared legal reviews and that there has been no action taken against it by other companies. We make our games very seriously, and we have absolutely no intention of infringing upon the intellectual property of other companies, he said. So what's going on here? Well, the short of it, it looks like there's a bunch of salty developers who are either envious or bitter of the success of Palworld, and then now they're trying to jump on this. They copy these assets, bandwagon, and they're just going out of their way to try to ruin the success and the amazing feeling these developers should be having right now with their massive success. Because at the end of the day, they know they're never going to have a 6 million sales in 4 days game. They're never going to be on a project this monumental that's going to have this much of a culture impact. Now, maybe it might be just the trend of the quarter or a fad that'll die out in a few months. I don't know. Pokemon hasn't died out in over a decade, so maybe Power World will have the staying power. I mean, certainly at a certain point in time, it's gonna, dip off. But how the developers continue to support the game with content and updates going forward will really determine this game's future. But even right now, if you're listening to this and you just want to enjoy the drama, the game is in early access, but it is mostly complete as far as I'm able to tell. Like, there's enough content in this that you will actually be able to play like a full game. Like, if this was 1.0, there's a few things that can be tweaked here and there, but yeah, it's a good launch. Really, though, this is what the industry's come to. This is sad. This is just kind of sad. Leave your thoughts down in the comments. This is all I gotta say about this stuff. There's better stuff to do than dealing with this petty drama from these people. Peace out, people.